Okay, you're ready.
Yep. All right. It is 1:06 by my watch, and I am calling the August 21st, 2023 meeting of the Albemarle County Architecture Review Board to order. Caroline, could you call the roll, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Henningsen,
Here.
Mr. Matsuno,
Here.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Here.
Mr. Stoner,
Here.
Mr. Hancock.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The public may access and participate in the meeting electronically. Instructions for doing so are posted on the Albemarle County website at the Albemarle County calendar. The public has real-time audiovisual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. All speakers, when it is your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. Applicants who are making presentations, note that your presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members. Staff will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. If applicants in the meeting room have team members attending virtually who will need to present, please make that known when you come to the podium. Everyone who is participating virtually, please mute your microphone until it is your turn to speak. Do any ARB members have anything to disclose? No.
Yes, I do. I won't be participating in the Flow CDJR amendment due to my employment at the firm presenting.
Yeah, nor will I. As
Okay.
well.
All right. Are there any members of the public that want to make a comment about a project that is not on the agenda for review?
I do not have anyone on Zoom.
All right, great. Thank you. We do not have any consent agenda items today, so we will move on to our one and only regular review item, which is ARB 2023-64 Flow CDJR amendment. Chris, is your presentation ready?
Yes.
Thanks.
Application I'm presenting on today is preliminary review of the renovation plan submitted for Flow Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram building. Site is located along Route 29 near the intersection with Hilton Heights Road. ARB has approved several applications for the site, including 2 special use permits in 2003. ARB applications in 2003 and 2005 for the original design of phase 1 and 2 buildings, in 2013 and 2022 for the renovations to the phase 2 buildings. Or phase 2 building. A condition of 1 in the special use permits is that the design of the phase 2 building shall be compatible with the phase 1 building as determined by the ARB. To orient you within the site, the phase 1 building is the larger building that we're reviewing today with the structured parking on the right side of the site. And the smaller building on the left is the phase 2 building for Subaru. The renovation of the Subaru building that was approved by the ARB in 2022 added ACM panels, slate-clad towers, and a canopy to elevations visible from Route 29. Painting the remaining brick and ephes on the east elevation was also proposed, but it was not ultimately approved by the board. The renovation to the CDJR building would cover the existing ephes-clad entrance element on the east elevation with ACM panels and paint the existing brick and ephes gray. No changes are proposed to the southern portion of the east elevation that houses a Honda dealership. The ACM panels introduced in the renovation design, while a modern building material, help reconnect the building with the design of the Subaru building. However, painting the red brick gray removes the connection to the historic architecture and the red brick that remains in the Subaru building in the southern portion of the east elevation of the CDJR building. Staff recommends revising the renovation design to maintain the red brick. Also requested with the submittal was a vehicle display podium with accent lighting. A special use permit is required for outdoor sales, storage, and or display. The site has an approved SP with a condition that does not permit elevated vehicle displays due to them not contributing to orderly and attractive appearance along the entrance corridor. This is a condition that's been consistently applied to similar SP requests in the county. Staff has requested that the display podium be removed from the renderings in the next submittal. Staff recommends approval of the major amendment with the revisions listed in the staff report. Be happy to try and answer any questions.
And thanks a lot. Go through and see if any members have questions for staff. Frank, do you have any questions?
I don't. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. Dave, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. I don't have any questions either. So we'll move on to the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, board members, for paying attention to this application. My name is Bruce Wardell. I'm an architect, and I represent Flow Automotive, which is who are the owners of the dealership. The ownership of the dealership has recently changed, so there's a whole series of kind of identification and signage that will be coming through as that happens, and that will be a separate. That will go its separate path. I spoke with the Flow Automotive this morning, representatives of Flow Automotive this morning, and they would like to withdraw the component of this application that paints the brick. Through our conversations, we just thought that it would make sense to leave the brick its current color. That means that the application now consists of basically repainting or refinishing the stucco in the Pelican gray that was submitted. And then the new canopy, the new entrance portico that is clad in a combination of a kind of satin finish panel. And then you can see a small sort of frame around the door that is a kind of reflective finish panel. And then the refinishing of the storefront, which would be refinish the existing storefront to a basic brushed aluminum storefront. And we understand the rejection of the display of the Jeep on the fake rocks, and we're heartbroken to see that go. But other than that, that consists of the entire application at this point in time. No need to make it more complicated than it is.
All right, thanks a lot. Just see if board members have questions for the applicant. Dave, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Bruce.
Frank?
I don't. Thank you.
Thanks, and I don't have any questions either.
Thank you.
So the ARB will now go into discussion. Frank, do you have any comments?
I think it's a really nice application. So just thinking about that, I know we a lot of times the applications come and we're left with a lot of questions. I feel like it did a really good job answering a lot of those questions with the existing views and explaining all the various relationships between parts of this building and then the phase 2 building. So great work on the application, and thank you for that. Given what we've just heard, I don't know that those are kind of the major sticking points that was prepared to discuss today. So I don't really have any additional comments.
All right, thanks a lot. Dave, do you have any comments?
No, I don't think so. I guess more a question for staff when we start looking at the motion is how we need to amend it, or if we need to amend it based on the applicant's verbal withdrawal of the element today.
All right, thanks. And kind of same goes for me. I kind of echo what Frank said. The only potential concern I had was regarding the paint. So without that on the table, I don't really have any issues or concerns with it. I guess if we could look at the recommended motion.
Or we're gonna try a different strategy for pulling this up today and see if it works. Just note that we do have the material samples there we can pass around, and would recommend leaving the item in about the maintaining the red brick, just because that's what the drawings are showing. The minutes can show, will show what the applicant has presented today, if that suits.
On the trim. That's an odd.
I guess, considering that the material samples are submitted, should we strike the second item, or is there still anything left to?
Well, I have stricken it. This is the new format we're trying. It's just not showing up on on the screen.
Slight delay?
There we go.
There we go.
It's the
Okay.
delay.
All right, are there any additional suggestions or modifications?
I don't have any.
On here. All right, well, in that case, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'm gonna have to get used to this new format. I don't know. If I can handle this, please excuse any mistakes. I move to approve the major amendment with the following revisions amended as follows: strike item number 2. Is that right? I mean, before we would say ARB 2023-64 flow CDJR amendment.
I think that's great, and we
Okay.
will make sure we add that in for the next time.
Sorry.
And I'll second the motion.
All right, thanks. Let's put it to a vote.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
We have a choice between the clunkiness of disconnecting and reconnecting every time we want to go back and forth, or a little bit of a delay. So
Yeah.
maybe this will be better.
All right, so we have one work session today for ARB 2023-52 Seaville Rio Road Apartments. And I think Chris has a presentation ready.
Yes, 1 second. If you all recall, in March of this year, the ARB approved the final site plan for this application pending staff approval of several conditions. In May and July of this year, staff received resubmittals intended to address those conditions. However, staff believes that the following conditions have not been sufficiently addressed. The first conditions regarding the design of the equipment utility structures on the side elevations of buildings 1 through 3. Since the previous review, the material has been revised from a flat hardy panel to a board and batten panel that matches materials used elsewhere on the end elevation. However, the minimal change results in these structures still retaining utilitarian appearance. Additionally, since the previous board review, a utility structure has been added to the north elevation of building 4. Another change to note since the board reviewed the application is the addition of a standalone structure east of building 4. The building uses materials found in the apartment buildings, but is a maintenance building set very close to the entrance quarter. Regarding the landscape plan, along the perimeters of the site, large shade trees are now shown. However, the spacing in the interior pedestrian parking lot trees remains inconsistent, and some of the trees do not meet the required caliber size. Staff's requesting the board's guidance on these remaining conditions of approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks a lot. Tara, do you have any questions?
No, not right now.
All right, Frank Hancock.
Thanks, Chris. The new, I guess maintenance shed building was that one of the questions of just removing that or like relocating that on the site? Or that was just
Just-
something you noted that's new is,
Noted and getting the board's thought as of something with kind of similar theme of the utility structure close proximity to the entrance quarter.
okay, and that one has popped up since we've
You
seen
all
it
last
last.
reviewed and approved.
Okay. Just curious, did you ask the applicant? Have you had conversations with the applicant about relocating this and the other ones and they've
Site.
not been
site
able to, or?
Kind of reference site constraints and layout constraints related to way we've already laid out the apartment buildings of relocating those structures.
Gotcha. And then maybe if we could go back to the landscape plan, the comment of,
Larger one.
was it the tree distribution on the interior, like streets or parking lot? Is that the question?
It's interior parking lot and pedestrian.
I guess if you wanna go back to the original presentation that just had your bullet points.
Oh, yeah.
Let's look at that one. I just want to make sure I understand that. Number 2. Is it a issue with like utilities and,
Of the inconsistent spacing,
yeah,
utilities and light poles are in a lot of the places they've noted that don't have interior trees, but they noted it could be a location for interior trees. If light poles and utilities are kind of throughout the site.
okay. I apologize, I should have looked for this, it just popped into my head. Did the applicant meet like numbers requirement?
So
It's just more of like a distribution and there's like obvious holes.
So I'd say that's probably 7 of the ones being counted for interior trees, so like 29 or 30 are consistent, but have more even distribution, but these in particular are also they're smaller caliber trees and just kind of gathered in that one location. Kind of really notice the lack of distribution towards the middle of the site.
Yeah, I'm definitely sympathetic to applicants when you're trying to cram all this stuff with these buildings, these utilities. I mean, and it's probably a lot of the underlying conditions aren't even showing up on this maybe, or they're in the background that are affecting those decisions. Cause I'm just knowing an applicant, those are usually like, you know, pretty easy to obtain the landscaping requirements, and it seems they're up against some issues like that, but that's helpful. Thank you. Just wanted to try to understand that better. I don't have any additional questions.
All right, thanks, Frank. Dave, do you have any questions?
No, Frank asked the one I had about the new structure at the north. So not being included in the original site plan.
All right, thanks. Tara, do you have any questions?
Oh, I already said no.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Sorry. Frank?
Yeah, just one question with regard to the parking. Is the parking shown the minimum by code? Parking surplus?
Actually, I think they've applied for a parking reduction that was approved. But they're under.
All right,
Thanks. It was-
I don't have any questions. So, Scott, do you want to do a a presentation or?
Thank you very much. I'm Scott Collins, Collins Engineering here, to represent the applicant. Also, the team of architects and landscape architects as well are on the Zoom call as well. So I think they would like to talk a little bit about the architecture aspects. And so I appreciate that. Two things I can kind of weigh in on. Yes, so we are getting a parking reduction on this project, 20%. So we're at 1.5 spaces per unit. So we've definitely tried to reduce that as much as possible. The second thing about it, speaking to Frank's comment about the landscape and utilities, we've done everything we can to bring utilities more into the travel ways as much as possible. We added extra manholes, a lot of time with the storm sewer to run it down the roads. We're using actually DI 2B and 2C boxes in a lot of locations that brings the pipes up underneath the curbs. So we can get the 5 feet separation, especially for the street trees along sort of the main travelway that goes down to the property behind us. So we've done a lot to kind of really focus on the fact that we knew we were going to be really tight on landscaping, and we've done, you know, almost everything we could to do to get all that moved out. I mean, we recognize that, you know, there's a couple spots, just like you were talking about, that does get a little bit, a little light on some spots, but a little heavy on the other spots to kind of even it out. But we've done a lot of different aspects to make all that happen. So that was the main thing with the landscaping aspects on this project. And at this time, I'll turn it over to the architects and let them talk a little bit more about the architecture aspects. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, for anybody that's joining via Zoom, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand feature so I can unmute you. All right, please state your name and unmute yourself, and you can start talking.
Hi, everyone. This is Lynn Halabi from Land Design. We're the landscape architects on the project. I just want to just state a little bit more on the idea of where we had our landscape and how we divided it. Frank, to answer your question, we are meeting all the requirements. We do have a cluster that Chris was talking about, and we tried to make it very purposeful by having like a bosque of smaller trees rather than having bigger trees that are placed in a closer grouping. And that's why we had smaller canopy trees. All of the calipers, though, are the bigger calipers. We are trying to get bigger trees. And then we did plant everywhere we could on site. And then obviously, as everyone had mentioned, there are a lot of utilities on site that do cross a lot of the potential locations that we couldn't, and that's where we couldn't plant any trees. And so that's why there are some holes as they were called. So yeah, I just want to explain a little bit more from our perspective. We did try to be as mindful as possible, spacing out all the trees, all of the requirements are met. And then whenever we did have to bunch up a bunch of trees, we did make it very purposeful, creating a purposeful design with a smaller caliper with, smaller canopy trees. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I do not have anybody else with their hand up at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we'll see if board members
Oh,
have,
wait, I spoke too soon.
okay,
All right, Nicholas, please unmute yourself and state your name, and you can start talking.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Nicholas Giederman with Hefner Architects in Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm hoping to have a little conversation with the board about the sort of the concerns over the utilitarian nature of the utility rooms that have been added to the masses of buildings 1, 2, and 3 along Rio Road. So I think kind of the iteration that you're currently reviewing, and that was in the presentation this afternoon, I think our kind of first thought was that we would make the same sort of gabling gesture that so rather than leaving like a single shed roof lean-to type building, that was sort of just grafted onto the main mass, of at least trying to keep the character of and work within the existing vocabulary without almost overemphasizing it, without turning a utility room into a giant significant bay that is in line with the center gable, or I guess in some of the cases slightly offline with the center gables, that it sort of became a formal conundrum. And I think we tried to err on the side of minimizing it. And I think what we're hearing is that perhaps that in an effort to minimize, it's still coming across as a little too utilitarian and shed-like, if that's a fair assessment. Not to speak on behalf of the board.
Well, I guess we'll just go through the board members individually and see if anyone has any comments or questions related to that. Dave, do you have any reactions?
Look, I don't know, is it possible to bring up the images again? Sorry, Chris, I should have asked you earlier. There are two utility structures, the one that's highlighted here and the one at the north, or are there?
The top left and right are just kind of examples.
Okay, the
of-
same
yeah.
thing. Okay. And these occur at each end of the building.
Correct. Except for building 3 is only on one end.
A question for the applicant. Can you describe what the actual physical dimensions of those projecting bays are?
They're typically about 4 or 5 feet deep. I think that there's some variation of what they're servicing. So it will depend on whether it's electric, water, or storage. But they're no deeper than 5 feet projected from the main mass of the building.
I guess without prescribing anything, somewhat sympathetic to the applicant's question. I don't know that necessarily the gable helps. It maybe calls more attention to it. I think maybe to the extent the piece could be articulated so that the doors and the more utilitarian openings and aspects of it receded into shadow or some depth, if the roof overhung somewhat, not to prescribe a solution. Yeah, I guess Chris and maybe the applicant, can you remind me what the first proposal for these bays was?
You switch the input for a second. Had kind of we found out it was a flat hardy panel to them, and still gable form, so really the large change is the material going from that, you mentioned in the staff or presentation, from the flat to the board and batten.
Wall surface behind it, all one face, or is there actually a break?
That'd be the current iteration of it.
Garage doors or regular doors? Because
I assume that would just be a rendering, wonky rendering, a rendering issue. But I don't think the doors would be.
Can the applicant
side.
clarify, is it a garage door or a door leaf?
And we'll let Nicholas talk again. Nicholas, unmute.
Back to the.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I keep myself very good company on these calls. So yes, the intention, to answer both questions. One was in the previous iteration where we were the all black solid panel. We wound up spanning both the main mass of the secondary gable as well as a bay, a visual bay, flat plane, but a material expression of a bay. And what wound up happening was I think the end result was almost calling too much attention now to this sort of back of house feature that it was interrupting two other masses of the building. So I think in this iteration, we're letting it be more of a subtler element within an overall element rather than spanning across two other building vocabularies. And yes, the intention would be we would have swinging hinged doors, not garage, not coiling overhead doors. And the intent would be to paint them to match the siding so that as best we can, we'll just make them disappear.
So Chris, is the rendering we just looked at current, or is that previous?
That would be the current one, but they're very similar other than the material change and changes Nicholas mentioned as well of kind of expression along the elevation.
Just looked at has garage doors, not.
I guess just as a possible alternative, if these are doors to, I assume, unconditioned spaces that the utility entrances are in, could they, instead of being swinging doors, be, gates made to resemble the siding so that the openings would effectively not stand out at all?
It's certainly something we can explore. I think that in an iteration we've seen where you almost end up with a darker sense of an opening by having just an open grill or hinged gate rather than having a solid panel door that's painted to match the siding. But it's certainly something we'd be open to exploring.
Yeah, I was thinking, would it be possible for it effectively to appear as if, excuse me, the siding was unbroken?
That would be the goal, yes. And I think that might just be a representation issue in, our elevations and our communication with the renderer would be that in theory, all of this, the trim, the door slab itself, all sort of just proceeds to the background with a monochromatic palette.
I guess an open question to fellow board members, whether the openings are the issue in terms of the utilitarian appearance and their treatment, or the mass itself, open question.
Yes, yeah, and I have another question for the applicant too. Earlier you mentioned that like these vary in function, like some are for storage, some are for electrical. Is it possible that the door changes based on what type of use is in it? That there are some garage doors and some swinging doors, or was that just something that was incorrect on that particular rendering?
No, I think that that rendering was just incorrect. I think that for telecom, I think that there is one closet that would require pairs of doors, because that's going to be a shallower closet with kind of wider panels within it. So in order to get our access clearance, it's sort of a trade-off that it would, you know, it either would be a deeper closet that we don't have room for in order to achieve a walk-in, essentially with a turnaround, or just a shallow, wide closet with pairs of double doors. So I believe what we were seeing in the rendering that was reading as a garage door was, and again, this is sort of just rendering materiality issues, but the design intent would be for pairs of swinging doors in that location painted to match the siding.
Thanks. I guess I might be in the minority with this opinion, but I thought that at least based on the prime example that we were looking at, the applicant successfully addressed the concerns we had last time. However, it seemed like some of the other building types, the treatment of these additions changed a little bit, and there were some that had like a simple shed roof, and some that had like a kind of a hip type roof situation where where it was just kind of hanging off of the building and not this kind of gable end statement. Was I misreading the drawings, or do they kind of change in appearance based on their position?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I needed to raise my hand again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. You are correct. I think that the gable treatment was sort of reserved to the more high visibility buildings directly on Rio Road. So I think where you're seeing either hips or gables, that's sort of back on like building 6 and building 5, sort of tucked in the back corner of the site, facing the neighboring property rather than the main gateway itself.
Yeah.
So that is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chris, can we see those versions? Okay.
The shed roof form that was added to, that's building 4 to the north end since the board reviewed and approved. In comparison to.
And just to clarify, I think that's a disconnect with the renderer, that if you look at the current elevations package that we submitted, we are showing gabled and utility rooms on building 4 where it fronts the gateway, where it fronts Rio Road.
Go back to the site plan too.
One second, I keep losing my mouse. Landscape plan?
Yeah, the planting would be helpful. Is that right, Frank? Can you
Just
zoom
show
in?
the location of those sheds.
Building 4 is none. And on this elevation, this end. Building. Other electrical. And water and storage on. And then there is one. kind of there.
That one, I guess, is just. One on each end of that building,
Which building?
building we just looked at, where you have your. The other end of that building, is that it?
Looks like, yeah.
Looks like storage on the opposite end, so I imagine similar. Form.
Chris, do you mind zooming in on those again that are on the ends that are most visible at the entrances? So there's
Left to right. So that, this one would been the shed form you saw in the one of the renderings. This elevation does not have. It does have a form. Next one would be facing inward to the parking lot along the entrance corridor. Similar form facing inward to the parking lot. Two opposite each other, storage, water storage seems. Some of them uses vary as alluded by the applicant. One last one. Along the perimeter of the property.
I guess a question maybe for the applicant is there room to provide any planting, I guess, at the location that's on screen right now that would reduce its visibility from the EC? Like a shrub even.
I would have to defer to civil and landscape on what our planting options would be within that space.
I mean, just tossing out, it seems like the ones that are on the sides at the entrance roads, if there were a well-placed shrub or a few, coupled with painting the doors to match the siding, so they just become very mute, I think would solve that. The one that's at the end facing the EC at the northern building seems a little more challenging in terms of planting it out. So that's an open. I guess the other question related to that one at the north is there is that areaway, or there appears to be an areaway at that end of the building. Would it be possible to locate the service entrances so that they're off of the areaway?
That the grade change?
Right, yeah,
Yeah, that was one thought I had, is that, does that move to the lower level?
right,
Is there a way, and then it's less visible?
right.
Right now it's up. Looks to be 5 or 6 feet up. from
Yes,
there.
yeah.
That seems to be the one. I feel like the other ones,
Mhm. Yeah, the other
in
ones are
looking at the
quite wide.
rendering and the landscape
Right.
plan, are pretty well screened.
Mhm.
And they're not EC facing,
Immediately.
but
Can we go back to the rendering of the EC facing?
Yeah, so that if that were accessed through the areaway and the projection were not necessary, that would, I think, improve that end elevation.
I guess this question for the applicant would be, is that possible to locate it down in that areaway?
Is there somebody else that should answer this question besides you, Nicholas?
I was just about to say, I might have to defer to Scott on this, to our civil engineer on this, as far as what our flexibility on relocating utility connections, as far as getting that electric room down. I mean, I would say from an accessibility standpoint, it certainly could pose some challenges as far as maintaining our two means of egress from a room where we have switchgear. So it may not be quite as simple as moving it within the footprint of the site. That we actually do need to be able to discharge both of those doors, as small as that electric room is, just given the size of the equipment that's feeding building 4.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not blocking any windows on that lower level, which I don't know if that's the case or not, that would have to refer back to the architects on that. But if it's not blocking the windows, we could possibly take that wall and extend it out a little bit further, obviously, because you don't see much of that wall. And that should give you enough clearance from that room, from the doors to swing open and to get any mechanical items in and out there. And that area, again, pulling that wall out would give us enough room to run utilities up that corridor to that room. So, I mean, that could be a possibility. As long as, I guess the main thing is as long as it works from an architectural standpoint. I know, with bedrooms, you have to have, certainly egress, but I don't know if that's in a bedroom back in that corner or not, but yeah, that seems like a possibility. And as far as putting some shrubs in front of the other ones, yeah, we have a lot more flexibility with, obviously, with shrubs than trees, because we can put shrubs on top of utilities as necessary. So I think that could definitely happen at some of those other locations.
God, it looks like existing access to those utility doors is kind of up a pretty steep hill right now. How are there stairs that are gonna go up to that, or is somebody just gonna have to climb that?
I think that's,
Bank.
well, that's somewhat of a rendering thing too, because when you come around off the parking lot around there, it's actually pretty flat.
Yeah.
And then the doors are, in front of the doors was pretty flat right there, and then it started to come down, slope down from there. But you also have a little bit of flexibility, just being a utility closet, or for utility, for water or for electrical, they can step up as well, but it's not as severe as
As it looks.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Do we want to talk about the structure in the parking lot at the north? Or
Yeah, I think it'd be worth just, giving our opinion on that.
Chris, can you bring up that image again?
And no, this is a older rendering, so the staff's already, and the applicant already handled with the equipment on that rear of that building that's already been relocated. But the rendering does not show that.
Is there landscaping adjacent to or what landscaping
So,
is proposed around this?
Landscaped.
I think it's a pretty nice maintenance building.
Yeah.
And I think it actually breaks up that edge where it would have just been kind of dead space as parking lot. It's kind of tucked up in the corner of the parcel too. I know it is EC facing, but I'd much rather have a building, especially with some architectural character like this, facing the corridor than, the front of cars. I don't think it'll look like this day one with this lush vegetation, but I think it will get there. Yes. My 2 cents.
I mean, in a sense, it's like the scale of a house, essentially, which we don't tend to take a really strong look at anyway.
Yeah, I guess for my part, I thought that kind of breaking up the gable ends with the smaller kind of sub gable, gave it, more kind of interest, I guess. There's a little bit more design to it than you would see on just a purely, utility shed type structure. So,
Yeah, I mean, it can almost read as like a clubhouse type, like community type building, I think. You just get a glimpse of it. If you go up and inspect it and see the size of it, you wouldn't think that, but as you're driving the corridor, that might be the sense you get.
Yes, Chris, as staff, is there anything else you would like to hear from us that would help?
Guess the last thing would be wasn't sure where we ended with the interior landscaping. Note if I recall the reduction of parking spaces down to 374, which require 37 trees. 29 or 30 of them are at 3.5, which is above the caliber requirement, but there are those 7 that are ornamental trees, not large shade trees as required. So it's kind of a give and take of higher caliber, but there are some that do not meet the caliber requirement and are kind of grouped together as mentioned in the presentation.
Yeah, Chris, is it possible for you to highlight that for us on
Yeah,
the site?
can you
plan?
point those out?
Looking at the landscape plan, these are what are being considered interior parking lot trees for the applicant, but they're ornamental trees. And then the trees to note in the kind of the red cross action are at 3.5 inch caliber. So it's above the interior parking area requirement of 2.5.
Are these the only ornamental trees on the site plan, the ones that
That are being counted
That
or
that are
considered
shown-
for
that are shown
interior.
on this?
Yes,
Everything else is a shade tree.
correct.
What's that portion with the parking lot that has like a roundabout? Or that goes around on the left-hand side? There's a red portion marked in between 2 double-loaded parking lots on the left-hand side of this drawing. There's some sort of utility running under that portion.
Oh, here.
Yeah,
I believe so, because I think
Okay.
the previous landscape plan showed trees.
Scroll down, I get up so we can see the top.
Or is it right away?
Shared use map.
Property line.
Do you know what the dash line is at the top? Just above that first building. The street trees appear to be set back and we're assuming that's an easement. A utility.
Dash line here.
That just
Yeah.
a
What
extra
is that right away?
wide right away right there.
Yeah, it's a lot of right of way and a whole lot of underground utilities, plus an overhead utility line. I mean, it is just clustered with
Chock full.
so much utilities right there. I mean, it's something I guess we kind of talked about at the beginning of the first ARB meeting, but we've been working with Margaret and Chris before we even submit the rezoning application, just kind of working on the placement of these buildings, knowing that that was going to be a huge concern with that. And we worked it out to where we'd have at least 10 feet of tree planting area in front of each of these buildings with all the utilities and all the buffer. And so and none of those utilities that we're really putting up there, except for some yard drains, because it's sloping down to our buildings in that location, as opposed to putting retaining walls and taking away from extra landscaping. So
Gotcha.
it's
I guess my thought on where the applicant is deficient in some of the plantings. You could focus any of that on any of the corridors or the breaks between the buildings, just as if you think about it, how it impacts the entrance corridor. I mean, what's directly behind the buildings to the back of the site, we're not as concerned with, but if there's an island that's kind of at the end of your entrance drive that's visible from the entrance corridor that doesn't have a tree, that might be worth seeing if something could shift there. But I do appreciate the going above and beyond in the extra or the other plantings, knowing that you were going to be deficient in some places. And like I said at the beginning, I feel your pain. It's hard to get all of these things in here. And when utilities are competing, utilities are pretty important. So.
Scott, what's the gross density per acre on this site?
I think we're around 32.
Wow. Okay.
It's very tight.
All right, well, any additional questions or comments?
Oh, is that I guess it was a dual, but is that the same? Take this stuff asking, is that the same answer for this interior pedestrian way trees? Pedestrian way trees. It's similar to interior parking, 2.5-inch caliber. In this site, in a lot of these similar sites, they usually double as one and the same.
That would be my thought.
I've taken notes on your comments. If we could just look over what I've drafted here to make sure we're all on the same page.
There we go.
Okay, so the first issue was the design of the equipment / utility structures on buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I've got is A, add shrubs to soften the appearance of the utility structures at buildings 1, 2, and 3. And B, revise the design to move the access to the utility structure at building 4 to the lower level. Is that accurate?
I don't know how others feel. I'm not sure the gable end to the utility structure really is an improvement, quite honestly. I'd sort of be inclined to have them utilize the same design for all of them and just do a better job of. But that's just me.
Of screening them.
I think the
of screening,
screening
yeah,
and the
yeah.
painting and
I just-
the openings are more
In
important.
some ways,
to
it
me.
brings more attention to it and makes it feel like it's something that it.
So is that use the shed roof form instead of the
Right,
gable?
use the shed, but again, got
Yeah, no
Three
objection.
architects here, so.
Yeah, it's not an entry or a space to, so, right, so.
Yeah, I mean, a utility room is by its very nature gonna look utilitarian, so, yeah, I think you can only dress it up so much before it's, making more out of itself than
Right,
it
yeah.
should. I think there was just that one corridor facing example, and I think if they are able to locate it, you know, kind of
Down below.
below grade, that seemed like the one that was really like, you know, prominent. So I think additional screening with shrubs and but I think
I don't know if it's something for our future guideline update, but similar to how we say that there won't be mechanical equipment visible from the entrance corridors, we might want to say mechanical equipment room entrances.
Right, right.
I mean, there's a degree of just building and site planning that we might ask folks to get them off the EC.
Do we want to add to this to paint the shed doors to match the siding?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think so.
And is 1D accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The second item regarding the added structure east of building 4, you don't need any changes. You're okay with it as it is. Accurate, okay. 3 and 4 regarding the interior parking trees and the sidewalk trees, make up for the deficiency by focusing additional trees in the breaks between the buildings.
My thought.
Yeah.
Open to.
Yeah.
Other ideas.
Works for me. And that applies to 3 and 4.
Yes.
And maybe we can note additional trees in the breaks between buildings, and then also by increasing the caliper of the trees that are present, similar to how the applicant.
Yeah, as proposed.
Yeah.
I guess last, where there, it might have been covered in increasing the caliber of the trees. Was the board okay with the ornamentals, and maybe particularly if they were had more consistent spacing and not grouped it off into the one location, that maybe kind of traded away of more consistently spacing those particular ornamental trees, acknowledging that there's utilities and lighting throughout the site, or increasing those ornamentals or if ornamentals group that they're large shade trees group that close together would really lend itself to plant health. The question is
You're
is that
saying
grouping
more ornamental,
ornamentals
more interior parking and
or like
ornamental trees.
providing more consistent, if ornamentals are okay, or providing more consistent spacing on those ornamentals that are kind of grouped off to the what's that, the northeastern part of the site, or is it just increasing the caliber of those trees, even though they're ultimately going to be grouped together?
So that area where the ornamentals are grouped rather than regularly spaced, are you okay with that the way it's shown, or do you want any change?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I think,
my opinion is kind of by grouping it, it's like the size of an individual tree or component of that. It's not as important as a standalone.
but I think, yeah, in that sort of cluster, a smaller caliper tree is probably okay. But
I agree, and I think. The way the applicant explained the design intent, that made sense to me.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, so we will move on to other business. first of which is approval of the August 7th, 2023 minutes.
Yep, I'll move for that approval.
Thank you. I'll second. Can I second? Okay, good.
Okay, Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Matsuno,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other items, do any board members or staff have any other items they would like to discuss?
No.
If I may, just maybe for future discussion, every time I drive 64 over the Ravenna, I'm reminded that when we reviewed the application for the development there were trees shown in all the visualizations, screening the development, and there clearly are none now. I would appreciate maybe just if staff could look at the approved site plans and see if there are not trees there or buffer there that were proposed. And then depending on those findings, I'd like to understand maybe what if anything, we may want to communicate to the applicant about the accuracy of the visualizations.
Yes. We'll get back to you on that
Okay.
as soon as possible.
Thank you.
The one on Pantops?
Yeah, it's
Peter Jefferson.
over near
By Peter
Martha
Jefferson
Jeff.
Place?
Yes,
Yeah, Martha
exactly.
Jefferson
Yes,
Place.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's no.
I think the topography was just understanding that cross section,
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
because it was all wooded.
it was, yeah. And so I'd like to figure out what happened either in the applicant's presentation or the applicant's drawings, or in my and other board members' interpretation of the visualizations we had, just to be sure that as we look at those in the future, we have it in mind.
Yeah, great point.
All right, and that,
I had one question with regard to the email that you forwarded from, I forget who wrote it.
Citizen email.
Yeah,
Was it-
yeah, well,
The one
or-
with the
yeah, she used to work for the county.
Marcia Joseph.
Marcia Joseph's, right, email. What is the new standard now, or is it not subject
Well,
to
is
ARB
this,
review?
you go ahead.
Nothing has been decided yet. It's just in process. So
You know what the proposal is?
I don't even think there is a specific proposal yet. It's just sort of under study at the moment. I
Gotcha.
can
I think there's a survey out. I don't know if it's still open, but yeah, the county is studying both its ordinance and the wireless infrastructure. There are still significant areas of the county without good coverage. And I think the questionnaire provides opportunities to comment on what sorts of change, if any change, you're interested in or open to.
I can look for a link to send you to get you up-to-date information. And I'll email that to you.
Thanks.
Yeah, but certainly it is of interest to the board because that ordinance has, contributed to the character of our entrance corridors. So board members may be interested in commenting on them.
all right. Next meeting, the next ARB meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. I presume that's the day after Labor Day. is
That's
that-
right.
Are there any board members who do not think they'll be able to attend?
I'm planning to attend.
Yes.
Same here.
Yes, I got it.
Thank you.
All right. In that case, this meeting is adjourned until our next meeting on September 5th, 2023. And by my watch, it's 2:15 PM.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you.